Hi, everyone. This is Miranda with the Valuable Voices podcast. I'm really excited for you guys to meet Bruce and Deb Potts today. Thank you both for being on.
Thanks.
You.
Thanks so much, Miranda.
Yeah, again, I just think they're adorable, and I cannot wait for you guys to hear their story and what they're doing. I could cry like just looking at you. So let's dive in. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, we hope we don't make you cry too much.
It's a good thing, right?
Yeah, it is, I guess, sometimes. Well, our story started 50 years ago, believe it or not, when we met in college. We quickly fell in love, got engaged, and got married right after we graduated. And we were kind of, I guess you would say we're on the fast track of life. We were actually in a program in school called the Fast Track, so we could graduate early. And we kind of thought we had life all figured out. You know, we had priorities of achievements and travel and career, later on children. And we attended church, but it wasn't really a priority for us. God was not a priority at all in our lives. And we had been married for about 15 years when we started going to a new church. And wow, it was so different from anyone that we had been to before, because they actually believed the Bible was true. And that was a surprise for us. The Bibles we received for our wedding gifts were still sitting on the shelves. We hadn't cracked them open in 15 years. But we really loved the approach of the pastor. We loved the people in the church and how caring they were. They just surrounded us with their love. And we gradually became aware that God wanted a personal relationship with us based on the sacrifice of Jesus. And I realized I didn't have faith. I didn't know how to make myself have faith. But one day I decided I'll just ask God. And so I just prayed a very simple prayer, really the first prayer in my life that I prayed in my own words, and just asked God, you know, if you really are there, if you really love me like your word says, will you give me the faith to believe? And it wasn't long after that. We were still going to church. I was in a Bible study. I was learning more and more. And I realized I could ask for salvation. And so I prayed a prayer. I didn't tell anybody. I didn't tell Bruce. I didn't tell our pastor. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't know I was supposed to. Wow. I didn't even pray for him. I didn't know I was supposed to be praying for him. We were so new to it, but I prayed to receive Christ. I dedicated my life to him. And I know now, looking back, that God was really active in both of our lives, because I was about to encounter a devastating situation. Sorry. Sometimes it still makes me cry. So this was 28 years ago. After a long battle with depression, my father ended his life by suicide. Wow. It was a really devastating, difficult time for our lives. And the brokenness it took years for recovery. But now, looking back, I can see all the ways that God was working very actively in our lives. For one instance, at the funeral, we were asked to read some scripture. And just before the funeral started, we decided we need to pray, because we didn't think we could do that and be composed. And so we went to a private place in the church. We had been married for 18 years at that point, and we had never prayed together except for a memorized prayer blessing over your dinner. And we just asked God to give us composure and calmness so we could read those scriptures and honor him. And he answered that prayer. Wow. Shortly after my dad's death, I learned in a very real physical way how much I needed God every single day. I would get up in the morning, get my kids off to school, and I would just come back and spend sometimes hours in the Word, reading his Word, praying, sobbing, grieving, until I had enough strength to face the day. But then the next day, I had to start all over again. Wow. And then just a few months after my dad's death, Bruce also came to the decision that he wanted to dedicate his life to living God's way, even though I hadn't been praying for him. And we kind of went through a lot of changes in a pretty short time. It made a dramatic difference in our family life, in our kids. We continued going to church and reading the Bible and studying the Bible and volunteering in church finally. Through the years that followed, women kept coming to me and saying, you need to tell your story. And that was nothing that I ever pictured myself doing. And so I resisted for a long time. But finally, I got up the courage to do it once for a women's group in a church nearby. And I have never looked back. I realized that is exactly what God called me to do, to tell the story. And I began speaking at many different groups, and I eventually wrote 2 books that kind of talk about what God taught me during that time. And I realized through that time of growth in telling the story that even though my story was very compelling and it changed me dramatically and our marriage, the story really wasn't over until I told the story.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I believe that that's part of the plan. You know, God, my story isn't just about me. It's about who hears my story and how that encourages them to walk towards God. Wow. So we just continued on. We were doing really well in our marriage. We were growing. We became marriage mentors at our church, and we've been doing that for 10 years now. And we thought, we have life all figured out.
Yeah.
But we had no idea what was right around the corner for us. And Bruce is going to pick up the story.
So if you sort of fast forward to January of 2020, kind of an auspicious time, at that time I was being diagnosed for chronic headaches. And it finally came to like March, and they did an MRI and they found that there was fluid on my brain. And I had to go to the ER immediately. So Debbie took me to the ER, but March at that time in Michigan was when hospitals closed down visitors. So she dropped me off at the door and couldn't come in, and had to wait in the parking lot until she could hear any more information. So they quickly determined that the diagnosis was that brain surgery was going to be required, and it had to be done as soon as possible. So I was admitted to an ICU. And there, you do some waiting in the hospitals. So even though it was urgent and they needed to do surgery, there were days when I was waiting. They were testing one thing or another and getting things prepared for it. And so when you're waiting, it brought us back to a verse that we both loved, which was James 1:2-4. Consider it all joy, pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance.
Wow.
Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. So I'm sitting in there, and we've been kind of dealt lemons, and we decided it's time to try and make lemonade out of it if we just only ask God how to do that. So I started asking the nurses how I could pray for them. And at that time, nurses, doctors, PAs, everybody in the hospital was very scared of COVID.
Wow.
And they couldn't imagine that a person who was scheduled for brain surgery could actually pray for them. And it was really rewarding for me. And I think it changed for them as well.
Yeah.
So the brain surgery happened a few days later, and they actually let Debbie come in for one day, for that day of the surgery. I saw her before and then after, and it was a subdural hematoma. So that's an accumulation of blood that was really about the size of a man's hand on my left side, and it had pushed my brain 1 inch from the left to the right. So that was obviously where the headaches were coming from. After the surgery was done, I went back to an ICU, and I was by others. And as I recuperated, I went back to asking nurses if I could pray for them. And at the same time, patients kept increasing for COVID.
Wow.
And so there would be a COVID ICU that an ICU that wasn't COVID where I was staying. They would have to convert it to a COVID unit. So they kept moving me from one ICU to another. They finally ran out of ICUs for non-COVID patients. So then I was in what would normally be an anesthesia recovery unit, which is just curtained with lots of bright lights and a ton of noise and a bunch of nurses who were trying to figure it out and scared as they could be. So it's not a good place to be when you're trying to recover from brain surgery. So as soon as I could, I got out of there. It was about a few days after surgery. I got to go home. It was so great to be home. I was there 5 days, and then I had to be back in for a CAT scan, just a routine CAT scan. They looked at the CAT scan and said, there's more fluid in your brain, more than there was the last time even. And it was starting to cause me to slur my speech. So the last thing I wanted to do was go back to the ER, but I really didn't have any choice. So I went in, I had a second surgery, same side. It was because of a rare infection that had caused this fluid to build up. And it could have been life-threatening if they didn't catch it when they did, but they caught it, and that seemed to improve things. Post-op, my speaking had begun to improve. Then it got much worse, and then my right side was paralyzed. So they decided they had to figure out what to do, and they were giving me meds for the infection, but it moved from just speech and paralysis to seizures. And once the seizures started, they had to use really strong seizure meds or anti-seizure meds, which made it harder to breathe. So the next thing, I'm on a ventilator.
Oh my gosh.
During COVID.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh.
So they thought that would last 2 days, but after one day I got off the vent and I thought, this is great. I'm making some real progress. And they did the things that they normally do. They ask you, what's your name? And everything I said was gibberish. So I could speak, but it didn't make any sense to them or to me. I was still paralyzed on the right side, and I couldn't even write my name. At one point, they gave me a whiteboard to write my name, and it came out H, 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 H. So that wasn't very helpful. So really, over the period of 22 more days in the hospital, I did rehab, and things came back quickly, rather quickly. The doctor kept telling me that he had seen this before. It is a complication from this type of surgery, but it does come back. And because he said that, I believed it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And by the time I got home, after 22 days at that point in time, I had more rehab to do, and I had to be on intravenous meds from home, but it just felt so good to be home. And when we look back, there was 30 days in total that I had been in the hospital. Debbie was only there for one of those days. So that was probably the longest separation we had had.
Yeah.
I can't imagine.
So several months after that, we decided to do a getaway and just reacquaint, because 30 days apart, kind of strains it a little bit. So I had a chance to read her journals. There were 4 journals that she wrote while I was in the hospital.
Oh,
I
wow.
write when I'm stressed.
Oh, boy.
And I had no real idea how much she struggled with the fears of what COVID might be. The next thing she would hear from a doctor as to how I was doing. And she was getting limited information, and she couldn't even connect to other people, and she couldn't connect with me. I got a new phone right before I went into the hospital. I switched to an iPhone. I didn't know how to use it all that well. I had the face recognition to be able to call her. It didn't work when you have bandages all over your head. And I had forgotten the password, and in all those moves, they would lose a charger about every second move.
Oh my
So
God.
it was really hard for her.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, just to talk with me. But surprisingly, the PAs and the nurses and a lot of people, even our doctor, they would call her, they would FaceTime with her and do things that it's just incredible to assume that they would do that at that time.
Right.
So she wanted to understand my feelings, because I didn't journal during that time. I was only cognizant about half of the time.
Yeah.
So I had to sit down and write things. And when she read through that, it really helped her to understand
Wow.
what it's like to be going through that, and to be in periods where, you're intentionally put in a position where, when they put you on a vent, you're sort of semi-coma so that they can keep you safe during that time.
Mm.
So we finally said, what do we do now? We have to make lemonade out of these lemons. And we said, it's a miraculous story. We want to use it to encourage other people in their struggles, because like Debbie said, our story wouldn't be over until we told our story.
Yeah. Wow.
So we thought about a memoir or an autobiography. but we know that we're not famous enough for everybody to read that. So sure, our family and friends would read it, but they pretty well saw the prayer requests along the way.
Mhm.
So we said we would jointly write a novel. We picked a novel so that we could write it about a couple who was being mentored, and then they went through the medical challenges, and they could see how their mentors and their church really helped them through those challenges. The big problem was neither one of us had written a novel. Debbie's writing skills were for nonfiction, and mine was PowerPoint. So yeah, obviously that's a stretch from writing a novel. But we just said our goal is to help couples, to help them in their marriages and help them who may be struggling in health issues. So it really took us 3 years to get to the point where we had it completed. And it's not because we were working. We were both retired at that time.
Okay.
It's just lots of versions, lots of rewrites.
Yeah.
And in January of this year, on Life Support was published by Elk Lake, and it's out at Amazon and all the places you would normally look for a book.
Wow. 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 Thank you so much, both of you, for just sharing your vulnerability, your story. I mean, I was on the edge of my seat. Like, we know you're alive because you're sitting right here, but
Yeah.
wow. Oh my goodness. And again, I'm putting myself in both of your shoes during that, and I can't even imagine. But what a cool story. I love the way you both kind of came to your faith and grew in that in your marriage. Like, that is just beautiful and powerful. And I love, again, what you're doing, just sharing your story, because that everything you just shared increases my faith, gives me hope, inspires me, and I know many others that are listening. So thank you for just walking that walk and doing that. So what's your website? How do we find you? And I love the book. I totally want to get my hands on that. But again, what does your daily schedule look like? What are you doing with your time?
Well, we are still marriage mentors at our church campus. And so we help to train new mentors. We have our own couples that we meet with. And we're also working on date nights. So we're kind of event planners as well. So we wear many different hats as far as marriage mentoring goes. And we're telling the story. We have family, we get together with. We have 2 grown kids, and they're both married, and we have 2 grandsons. One of them is graduating this year, so we'll be going out to Wisconsin to spend time with them for the graduation. And so, we have a very full, active life, and we're finding more and more time is needed to keep our bodies going the older we get.
But you're having fun doing it, and you're doing it together.
We are.
We have interviews, and we have some book signing events that we're doing. So
that's great. So
and
sorry, what's your website? How do we find you, and how do we get in touch with you?
Yeah, the website is debpotts.com.
Okay.
And so it's easy, DEBPOTTS.com.
Yep.
And on that website, you can find some free gifts for couples. We have a devotional, a short little devotional. We have a little ebook called Better Together that can help you understand each other's personalities. It includes a free personality assessment, and then how you can work together, because most couples are very different. Like Bruce and I are complete opposites. We couldn't be more different.
Yeah. Wow.
But we can be better together. We believe that throughout the whole time of writing the book. We were learning a lot, and our editors were teaching us skills, but we kept saying, this is really hard, but we can be better together. And we believe the book is better because we did it together.
I love that.
And we also have discussion questions for the love and life support that you can find there. And we have also a little paper to help you understand what marriage mentoring is and the difference between mentoring and counseling. So we really encourage couples to find somebody to walk alongside of them and do life with them, because it really makes a difference to be in community in your marriage.
Yes, 100%. I mean, gosh, I wish that was like a necessity for life. Whether you have a coach or a mentor together, but also separately. I mean, I'm so into that and personal growth. So again, I just love hearing your whole kind of life story and journey in just a few minutes. You just did it so well and eloquently. And again, I just can feel your heart and, just the peace and the love that you all have, not only for each other, but for others that you're, I can tell you just want to help other people do that and share God's story. So
Yeah.
what a blessing to have you. Just thank you both for being on, and yeah, we'll put all the notes, where to find you and everything. And I hope that you just continue, sharing God's story and blessing so many people. I know you will.
Well, we will. Thank you so much, Miranda. I hope
Thanks a
that
lot.
you continue to do what you're doing because you're helping to tell the story too.
Yes, I love that. It really is true. It really is about telling the story. And so many people are afraid to do that, but I don't think you realize how inspiring that is. Like, think of other people that have shared their story with you, and that's built your faith. That's all you're doing,
Exactly.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yes.
Well, keep doing your thing, and God bless you both. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.